I was hired as the caretaker for an alien woman, but they didn't tell me how she treated human men. Eli stared out of the small shuttle window, watching the endless black of space broken only by tiny pinpricks of distant stars. The station ahead looked like nothing he had ever seen. It was massive, floating silently in orbit, with curves and towers that reflected the light of a nearby sun. The Interstellar Corporation had promised him a standard caretaker position, nothing more. Yet even from here he could feel the weight of something different. He swallowed hard and adjusted the strap of his bag. This was it. A job far from Earth, caring for someone who was supposedly difficult but dignified. The briefing had been vague, the kind that made him uneasy. He had no real idea what to expect. As the shuttle docked, Eli could feel the slight tremor through the floor. The airlock opened and he stepped into a hallway lit by soft, shifting light. The walls themselves seemed to breathe, colors flowing like liquid. Eli shook his head. This is not normal, he thought. A voice spoke from nowhere, smooth and calm. "Welcome, Eli. I have been expecting you." He froze. The voice was not robotic, not mechanical. It carried weight, almost like it knew him before he even arrived. Thank you," he said cautiously. "I'm ready to start my duties." "Good." "Follow the path," the voice replied, and light panels on the floor illuminated, guiding him forward. The hallway turned several times, each curve opening into spaces that seemed impossibly large for the station's exterior. The walls shifted slightly as he walked, almost as if they were adjusting to him, responding to his presence. He felt watched, but it was not threatening, more curious. Finally, the hallway opened into a vast room. At its center stood a figure that made Eli's breath catch. Serafina. She was tall, elegant, her skin pale with a faint shimmer under the soft lights. Her hair flowed like liquid silver, and her eyes were not entirely human. They were larger, a shade of green that seemed to glow, intelligent and piercing. She was dressed simply, yet everything about her radiated authority. "Eli," she said softly, "you have arrived." "Yes, ma'am," Eli replied, trying to sound confident but feeling small in her presence. "I am Serafina," she continued, her voice calm but commanding. "I understand you will care for me during my stay on this station. Is that correct?" "That's right," Eli said. He tried to step closer, but the room seemed to stretch, making the distance between them feel longer. She tilted her head slightly, observing him. "Good. You must understand this is not a simple caretaking role. There will be challenges. Not all of them are physical, many are mental." Eli swallowed. "I understand. I'll do my best." "Good," she said, a hint of a smile crossing her lips. "We will see." The next few hours were filled with orientation. Eli was shown the quarters he would occupy, the systems he was responsible for, and the protocols of the station. It was more than he had imagined. There were rooms that defied gravity, corridors that twisted in impossible ways, and machines that seemed alive. Each system responded to commands as if it understood intent rather than language. As he unpacked, Eli noticed the subtle ways the station reacted to him. A panel slid closed when he lingered too long, a light dimmed when he felt uncertain. He realized the environment itself might be part of the test Serafina had warned him about. Dinner was an interesting affair. Serafina dined alone in a room filled with softly glowing plants that hovered in the air. Eli served the meal at a distance, careful to follow the instructions he had been given. She watched him without speaking, taking a bite only after he had stepped back. "You are cautious," she finally said. "I like that. Most humans are too hasty or too careless." Eli nodded, unsure what to say. I try to do my best." "Good, you will need to. This station is not safe in the conventional sense. Safety here is complex." Eli glanced around, realizing that she was not exaggerating. The entire environment seemed designed to challenge and test. There were no handrails, no visible controls, yet he had already noticed that some machines responded when he hesitated or thought carefully. After dinner, Serafina dismissed him. "Rest, Eli. Tomorrow we begin in earnest." Alone in his quarters, Eli sank onto the bed, staring at the ceiling. His mind raced with questions. Who was Serafina really? Why had he been chosen? And what did she mean by mental challenges? Sleep came fitfully. When he awoke, a soft chime echoed through the room. A message had appeared on a small, floating screen. "Observe, learn, adapt. Only humans can do what others cannot." Eli frowned. The words were strange, almost like encouragement or a warning. He dressed quickly and made his way to the central chamber where Serafina awaited. She was standing by a large window overlooking the orbiting planets, her arms crossed. "Good morning, Eli," she said. "Today begins the first stage of your duties." It is simple to explain, but difficult to master. Eli nodded. "I'm ready." She gestured to a panel on the floor. "You will maintain balance and harmony within the station. That includes environmental controls, maintenance systems, and my personal needs. But you must also anticipate changes, unexpected events. Many species cannot do this. Humans can. I want to see if that is true." Eli blinked. "Anticipate changes. I'll do my best. Do not rely on best alone. You must think, adapt, and respond. That is what survival requires here." The first task seemed simple: adjust the lighting in a series of rooms to suit her comfort. But as Eli moved through the corridors, he realized that the lights shifted in response to his emotions. When he hesitated, they flickered. When he rushed, they dimmed. He began to understand that the station itself was alive in some way, attuned to his thoughts and feelings. Hours passed as he worked, learning the subtle language of the environment. By the time he returned to Serafina, he was exhausted, but she was smiling, just barely. "You are learning faster than most," she said. "But there is much more to come. Humans are unpredictable. That is both your strength and your weakness." Eli nodded, unsure whether to feel proud or worried. As he left her presence for the night, he couldn't shake the feeling that he had stepped into a world far larger and stranger than he had ever imagined. And that in the coming days, he would face tests that would challenge not just his skill, but his mind, his courage, and his very understanding of what it meant to be human. Alone in his quarters, he stared out at the stars. Somewhere out there, other beings watched and underestimated humanity. Eli felt a strange mix of fear and pride. He was a caretaker, yes, but perhaps humans were not so simple to underestimate after all. And somewhere in the depths of the station, Serafina watched him too, smiling faintly, knowing that the game had only just begun. The next morning, Eli awoke before the station's soft chime could reach his ears. His mind was restless. Images of the previous day's strange rooms and shifting lights filled his thoughts. He dressed quickly, careful not to make a sound, and stepped into the hallway. The station greeted him as if it remembered his presence. The walls shimmered softly, almost like a welcome. When he reached the central chamber, Serafina was already there, standing in the middle of the room with her hands clasped behind her back. She looked calm, serene, but Eli could sense the faint tension in her posture, a readiness for observation that made his stomach twist. "Good morning, Eli," she said, her voice smooth and measured. "Today we begin the first real test." Eli's stomach tightened. "Test?" he asked, trying not to sound nervous. "Yes," she replied simply. "Your duties are more than cleaning and maintaining systems. You must anticipate problems, adapt to unusual situations, and remain calm under pressure. We begin with a simple exercise." She gestured to a panel on the floor. The surface rippled like water as Eli stepped closer. "This room contains several environmental nodes," Serafina explained. "You must bring balance to all nodes simultaneously. They will react to your actions, your emotions, and even your hesitation. If you fail, the room will reset and you will begin again." Eli swallowed hard. The words were simple, but the meaning was clear. This was no ordinary caretaker task. He would have to control something that seemed alive, something that could sense him in ways he didn't yet understand. He knelt by the first node, a small cube that glowed faintly. The instructions were displayed in symbols, unfamiliar and alien, but when he touched the cube, he felt an instant connection. The cube responded to his intentions. A thought of warmth caused it to glow brighter. A thought of doubt made it flicker. Eli took a deep breath and focused. One by one, he touched the nodes, adjusting them according to their responses. Each movement required patience, observation, and quick thinking. Some nodes reacted immediately, others resisted, forcing him to try a different approach. Serafina watched silently from across the room. Her gaze was steady, but Eli could feel it pressing against him, measuring his every reaction. Hours passed, or perhaps minutes. Time seemed to distort within the chamber. Eli's hands ached and his mind felt strained. Yet slowly he began to understand the rhythm of the nodes. He learned to anticipate their reactions, to move with confidence rather than hesitation. Finally, all nodes glowed steadily in perfect balance. Eli stepped back, chest heaving, sweat on his brow. Serafina approached him. "Impressive," she said. Most humans would have given up long before this point. You show patience and adaptability. These are rare traits even among your species. Eli nodded, feeling a mixture of pride and relief. Thank you, ma'am, he said. I just tried to focus. Focus alone is not enough, Serafina replied, her voice calm but firm. You must also learn to read the environment to anticipate its needs. That is what separates humans from others. Other species rely on strength, logic, or memory. Humans have intuition. Eli felt a surge of pride. He had always thought of humans as ordinary, but here in this alien environment, his species' unique traits were proving valuable. The next challenge came in the form of an unexpected alert. A soft alarm echoed through the station, accompanied by flashing lights in several corridors. Eli instinctively ran to the source, guided by a combination of his memory and intuition. The problem was a malfunctioning air filtration system in a sector far from Serafina's chamber. The readings were erratic, and the controls were unlike anything Eli had seen. Most humans would have panicked or called for help, but he knew that hesitation would only worsen the situation. He examined the panels, noticing patterns in the fluctuations. The system was responding not just to mechanical failure, but to environmental variables he had not yet accounted for: temperature changes, airflow, and even the station's subtle energy pulses. Eli took a deep breath and began to adjust the system, relying on instinct as much as observation. He experimented carefully, learning how the controls responded, and slowly the readings stabilized. When the last gauge returned to normal, Eli leaned back, exhausted but triumphant. The station itself seemed to acknowledge his success. The walls pulsed gently, lights dimming to a soothing glow. Serafina appeared at the doorway, her expression unreadable. "Well done," she said. "You handled that situation with ingenuity and calm. Many humans would have panicked, others would have failed entirely." Eli felt a surge of pride. I just tried to think logically," he said. "Logic alone would not have been enough," Serafina replied. "You adapted. You felt the environment and acted. That is what makes humans different." For the rest of the day, Eli continued his caretaking duties, each task designed to test not only his skill but his patience and adaptability. He learned to anticipate the station's moods, to adjust to its subtle cues, and to maintain composure under stress. By evening, he was exhausted but exhilarated. He had survived his first real challenges, and in doing so had begun to understand why humans were valued, even respected, by Serafina and her species. As he prepared for rest, a soft message appeared on the floating screen in his quarters. "You have done well today, Eli. Tomorrow the tests become more personal. Remember, humans are unpredictable. That is your greatest strength." Eli frowned, curious and a little apprehensive. Personal tests, what could that mean? Sleep came uneasily, filled with dreams of glowing nodes, shifting walls, and Serafina's piercing green eyes. He woke several times during the night, convinced the station itself was observing him, learning from him, preparing for what was to come. The next morning, Eli was summoned again. This time, Serafina had arranged a more unusual test. A group of humans visiting the station was scheduled to arrive, and Eli's task was to interact with them on her behalf, managing their needs and observing their reactions without interference. The visitors were anxious and unfamiliar with the station. Their nervousness made them fidget, misstep, and struggle with the controls. Eli quickly realized that his role was not just caretaking, it was leadership. He guided them patiently, using intuition and observation to anticipate their mistakes before they occurred. Serafina watched silently, occasionally asking questions in her soft, measured voice. "Why did you choose that solution?" she asked. "What made you act in that way?" Eli explained each choice, showing both logic and instinct. She nodded thoughtfully, impressed not only by his skill, but by his ability to understand and adapt to the human's behavior. By the end of the day, the visitors were safely returned to their shuttle, grateful and amazed by the station's efficiency and Eli's quiet guidance. Serafina's expression softened slightly. "You are learning quickly," she said. "It is rare for a human to adapt so rapidly to both alien systems and other humans. You have potential." Eli felt a mixture of pride and relief. He had begun to understand that this job was more than caretaking. It was a test of human resilience, ingenuity, and adaptability. Each challenge reinforced a truth he had not realized before. Humans were underestimated, but in the right circumstances, they were capable of remarkable things. As he lay in his quarters that night, Eli reflected on the past 2 days. The station, the challenges, and Serafina's keen observation had pushed him to his limits. Yet he felt stronger, more confident. He realized that being human was not a weakness in this vast universe. It was a strength that few species understood or expected. And somewhere in the depths of the station, Serafina watched, her eyes gleaming with quiet approval. Eli was learning. Slowly, he was beginning to show her what humans could truly do. Tomorrow, the challenges would become even more personal, even more intense. But Eli felt ready. He had survived the first stage. He had adapted. And in doing so, he had begun to prove that humans were a force not to be underestimated. The morning light drifted through Eli's quarters, softer than any sunrise he had known on Earth. Yet it did not bring comfort. His mind was already awake, filled with thoughts of what Serafina had meant by personal tests. When he arrived at the central chamber, Serafina was waiting. She stood in the center, tall and poised, the green glow of her eyes catching the light in a way that made him feel exposed, though she had said nothing. "Good morning, Eli," she said softly. "Today you face a different kind of challenge. It is not physical nor mechanical. It is not even purely logical. It is personal." Eli swallowed. He had learned to trust her words, yet the vagueness of this test unsettled him. "You will enter a simulation," she continued. "A recreation of your own mind and of your own fears. The station will observe how you react, how you solve problems when logic and skill alone cannot guide you." Eli's stomach tightened. "A simulation?" he asked, trying to hide the nervousness in his voice. "Yes," she said. "You will face scenarios designed to push you emotionally, to test your resilience, your creativity, and your moral strength. Many humans would fail this stage. Let us see if you are among the rare few who succeed." She gestured toward a circular platform in the center of the room. As Eli stepped onto it, he felt the floor shift slightly beneath his feet. A soft hum filled the air, vibrating through him in a way that was almost comforting. Then, with no warning, the chamber dissolved into darkness. When he opened his eyes, Eli was standing in a forest. It was dense and foggy, the air thick with the smell of damp earth and moss. The forest seemed alive, the leaves rustling as if whispering secrets he could not understand. At first, he thought it was just a hallucination, a trick of the station. But then he saw the paths shifting, rearranging themselves as though the forest itself were testing him. A voice echoed softly, familiar and commanding. "Find your way, Eli. Your fears are the obstacles, your courage is the key." Eli's heart pounded. He began walking carefully, keeping his mind focused on the goal, find a way out. But the paths twisted unexpectedly, each turn leading him back to the same clearing. Shapes moved at the edge of his vision, shadowy figures resembling people he had known, voices whispering doubts and fears into his mind. "You are not strong enough. You cannot do this alone. You will fail." Each whisper tightened his chest, testing his confidence. Eli shook his head. "I am human," he muttered aloud. "I adapt, I survive." The forest responded. The shadows faded slightly and one path opened ahead. Eli moved cautiously but determinedly. Along the way, he encountered challenges that mirrored his own fears. A crumbling bridge over a chasm, a maze filled with mirrors reflecting distorted versions of himself, even a storm that seemed to bend reality around him. Each obstacle tested something different: courage, patience, problem-solving, and empathy. At the mirror maze, Eli saw distorted versions of himself failing, panicking, and giving up. For a moment, he felt doubt creeping in. But then he remembered Serafina's words. Humans are unpredictable. Humans adapt. He studied the mirrors carefully, noticing that each reflection mirrored not only his appearance but also his thought patterns. By remaining calm and observing, he began to predict how the maze would shift, moving step by step toward the exit. When he reached the storm, wind, and rain bending around him in impossible directions, Eli realized that force alone would not help. He had to feel the environment, understand its rhythm, and act in harmony with it. He used his body and mind together, predicting patterns in the storm, moving at the right moment to avoid being swept away. Finally, he emerged from the forest into a bright clearing. A pedestal appeared, and on it was a simple object, a small crystal glowing with green light, the same shade as Serafina's eyes. Eli reached for it, and as his fingers touched its surface, the forest dissolved, replaced by the familiar chamber of the station. Serafina stood before him, calm and unreadable. "You have succeeded," she said. "Many humans would have faltered in the simulation, others would have fled. You adapted, you observed, you endured. That is why humans are remarkable." Eli fell to his knees, exhausted but relieved. I didn't know if I could," he admitted. "It felt real." "Because it was," she said softly. "Not real in the physical sense, but real in consequence. You faced your fears, your doubts, and you emerged stronger. That is the essence of what it means to be human. You are resilient in ways few species can comprehend." For the next few hours, Eli rested while the station ran diagnostics on his performance. When he returned to the central chamber, Serafina had arranged another test, this time with direct interaction. Two alien diplomats arrived from a neighboring species, tall and rigid, their expressions unreadable. Their systems and protocols were foreign, and Eli was tasked with managing their needs while observing and predicting their behavior. The diplomats were precise but inflexible. Every error Eli made seemed amplified, every hesitation noted. He quickly realized that to succeed, he could not rely solely on logic. He had to understand them, anticipate reactions, and sometimes improvise solutions. At one point, a minor accident occurred. A device the diplomats were using malfunctioned, sending sparks across the floor. Humans might have panicked, but Eli stayed calm. He quickly assessed the situation, used his environment creatively to shield the diplomats, and stabilized the device. Serafina observed silently, her eyes following every movement. "You think quickly, yet you also think differently from others," she said later. "Most species react predictably. Humans do not. That unpredictability is a weapon, a strength, and a survival tool." By the end of the day, the diplomats departed, impressed by Eli's skill and adaptability. Serafina finally spoke to him alone. "You are learning, Eli. But there is one more thing you must understand. Strength and intelligence are not enough. Humans succeed because they are flexible, courageous, and morally aware. You see, we aliens often underestimate the human mind. That is why you survive." Eli nodded, exhausted but encouraged. I think I'm beginning to understand." "Good," Serafina said, her green eyes piercing yet approving. "Tomorrow, your final test in this stage begins. You will face a situation designed to challenge all you have learned, your skill, your courage, your intuition, and your ability to protect others. Are you prepared?" Eli hesitated, then straightened. "I'll do my best," he said firmly. "Your best may not be enough," she replied. "But humans often surprise us." That night, Eli reflected on everything he had faced. The forest simulation, the unexpected challenges with other humans, and the constant observation by Serafina had pushed him to limits he had never known. Yet through it all, he felt a strange sense of pride. Humans were underestimated, yes. But here, in this alien station, he realized that their adaptability, courage, and ingenuity made them a species capable of far more than most believed. As he drifted to sleep, Eli felt the presence of the station around him, sensing, observing, and perhaps even approving. Somewhere nearby, Serafina's eyes watched him through systems and networks beyond his understanding. He was no longer just a caretaker. He was a human among aliens, a species that was underestimated, yes, but capable of surprising even the most advanced beings in the galaxy. And tomorrow, he would face the ultimate test of all he had learned. The station was quiet in the early hours, the hum of its systems the only sound Eli could hear. Sleep had been elusive. His mind replayed every challenge he had faced in the past days. The forest simulation, the environmental nodes, the visiting diplomats, all of it had tested him in ways he hadn't imagined. And now he sensed that today would push him further than ever before. He entered the central chamber to find Serafina waiting, her posture calm and unreadable. The green in her eyes seemed brighter than usual, almost glowing. "Eli," she said, "today is the ultimate test. It will combine everything you have learned, observation, intuition, adaptability, and moral courage. Are you ready?" Eli took a deep breath. "Yes, ma'am," he said, though his heart raced. "Good, follow me," Serafina replied. She led him to a large corridor lined with panels, tubes, and doors that seemed to shift when they weren't being watched. The station's energy hummed beneath their feet. Without warning, alarms blared. Red lights flashed across the corridor. Eli froze for a moment before Serafina's calm voice cut through the chaos. "A containment breach has occurred in Sector 7. A volatile energy core is destabilizing. You must secure it before the station is damaged, or worse, lives are lost. Eli's mind went into overdrive. He had trained for simulations and minor emergencies, but nothing had prepared him for a real crisis. He quickly analyzed the layout of the station in his memory. Sector 7 was several corridors away, and the energy readings were rising. Panic would do nothing. He had to rely on observation, intuition, and speed. As he ran through the shifting corridors, he noticed the station reacting to him. Walls shimmered, panels slid open to reveal alternate paths, and guidance lights adjusted subtly to lead him faster. He realized the station was alive, assisting him, but only in response to his focus and calm. If he panicked, it could hinder him. When he reached Sector 7, the scene before him was unlike anything he had imagined. The energy core pulsed violently, sparks flying in all directions. Alien containment systems struggled to stabilize it, some failing entirely. The area was too dangerous for unprotected humans, but Eli's training with the station's adaptive systems gave him a unique advantage. He could interface with controls others could not. He knelt by a control panel, trying to understand the patterns. The core was erratic, its fluctuations influenced by multiple factors: temperature, energy flow, and the station's feedback loops. Most species would follow standard protocols and hope for the best. Eli had no such option. He needed to anticipate, improvise, and adapt in real time. Using a combination of hand gestures, focus, and the station's intuitive response systems, Eli began to stabilize the energy flow. Sparks subsided slightly, readings became less erratic, but the core was far from secure. A sudden surge sent him tumbling back, and he hit his shoulder against the wall. Pain flared, but he forced himself up. Failure was not an option. Serafina's voice echoed softly through the chamber. Humans are unpredictable. That is why they survive. Use your mind, Eli. Trust yourself. Eli closed his eyes for a moment, taking a steadying breath. He felt the station beneath his hands, sensed the energy patterns, and began to synchronize with the core. It responded slowly at first, then more predictably, as if acknowledging his presence and understanding. Hours seemed to pass in minutes. Each adjustment required precision and intuition. If he miscalculated, the core could explode, devastating Sector 7 and beyond. Sweat dripped from his forehead, his muscles ached, but he persisted. Finally, with a decisive gesture, the reading stabilized completely. The core hummed steadily, glowing softly instead of violently. Eli stepped back, exhausted, and allowed himself a brief moment of relief. Serafina appeared beside him, her eyes calm but shining with approval. "Remarkable," she said. "You adapted under pressure, used intuition when logic was insufficient, and solved a problem others would have deemed impossible. This is why humans endure. You are not just resilient, you are innovative, courageous, and unpredictable." Eli sank to his knees, breathing heavily. I did it," he said, still in disbelief. "You did more than that," Serafina replied. "You proved what humans are capable of. Many species rely on rules, predictability, and strength. Humans rely on their minds, their instincts, and their courage. That combination is dangerous to underestimate." Even as the adrenaline faded, Eli noticed something else. The station itself seemed calmer, almost relieved. It had recognized his success, adapted to his thinking, and supported him in a way that no other species could have. "Come," Serafina said, leading him to a quiet observation chamber. From there, Eli could see the entire station, the planets in orbit, and distant stars beyond. Today was not just about controlling a core. It was about proving your worth, your value. Many humans would have failed under pressure, but you adapted, learned, and protected life. Eli looked out at the stars, feeling a mixture of pride, exhaustion, and awe. I never realized humans could be so powerful in ways like this," he admitted. "You underestimate yourselves," Serafina said softly. "Other species do too. That is why humans are dangerous, not through aggression, but through ingenuity, adaptability, and moral courage. That is what you have shown today." As he rested in the observation chamber, Eli reflected on the path that had brought him here. The forest simulation, the environmental nodes, the visiting diplomats, and now the containment crisis. Each challenge had pushed him to his limits, but each had also revealed a truth. Humanity's strength was not in force or speed, but in mind, heart, and spirit. Later, as Eli prepared for sleep, the station's lights dimmed to a soft glow, almost like a reward. A message appeared on the floating screen. You have completed the trials of this stage. You have proven adaptability, courage, and ingenuity. Humans are underestimated, yet you survive where others fail. Tomorrow begins a new chapter. Eli smiled faintly, feeling the weight of accomplishment. He had faced his fears, his doubts, and the unpredictable nature of the station, and he had triumphed. Somewhere, Serafina watched. Her eyes, glowing green in the distance, reflected quiet admiration. Eli had passed not only as a caretaker, but as a representative of his species, a human capable of surprising even the most advanced alien minds. And in the depths of space, the stars seemed to echo a truth Eli had begun to understand. Humans were not ordinary. They were unpredictable, adaptable, and capable of greatness beyond imagination. Tomorrow, he would face the next stage. But for now, he allowed himself to rest, knowing he had proven something extraordinary. Humans could survive, adapt, and thrive where others would falter. And perhaps in the eyes of beings like Serafina, that was the greatest strength of all.